or various pharmacies. You know, our pharmacy, Towncrest Pharmacy, CVS, Walgreens, they're all in it.
Got it.
Yeah, it'll be a little bit county by county. You know, obviously Johnson County with the hospital here is going to be probably a little bit more diverse, whereas a small county where maybe they just have a, you know, pharmacy and a hospital, it'll probably work out a little differently.
Gotcha.
Well, can't be any too quick for me. I'm anxious.
Ditto.
Yes.
Ditto.
All right. Hey, it looks like the help desk is coming in. So somebody signed in as the help desk. There, now it's gone. Great. Well, we'll start in a minute or two, everybody. So I did have an idea. And I think part of it is because I myself, like all of us, am really tired of being in my home all the time. I'm tired of COVID. I would love to like have drinks and have a visit with somebody at a lovely cafe or a restaurant somewhere, but we all know that we're not able to do that. And, you know, so it's January and life is, you know, it's all getting kind of older and older and it's colder and a little more challenging to get outside. So here was my thought. I would appreciate it if people could go into the chat and provide recommendations of different things that people could do this weekend, right? The weekend is coming. The one thing I saw was that Film Scene is providing a couple of different movies for free, including the documentary that is about, I'm going to forget his name, but the civil rights legislator from Georgia who passed away. Cindy just said it, but I can't hear her because she's muted. But
John Lewis.
John Lewis, that's it. The John Lewis documentary. They're actually showing that starting Friday for free on Film Scene. So that's my recommendation. But I myself am going a little stir crazy, and I would appreciate, and I think all of us would appreciate other recommendations of things to do this weekend safely and securely. I mean, we can't go to Budapest where Anna is and, you know, do some really great carry out food. Can you imagine what she's able to get? Oh my gosh.
I'm eating my food that my dad brings to my quarantine tour.
That is great. So here we have a few. We have sledding at Brown Deer, but don't break anything. Yeah, it is more and more of a risk, I have to admit, for me. So please go out there and put in your recommendations. So with that, I am going to start the meeting. It's 12:03. Welcome to the Iowa City Noon Rotary. My name is Barb Thomas. I'm your president for this year. So we start each meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. And so if you're able to stand and join me in the pledge, please do so. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America,
and to the
to the
republic
republic for which it stands,
one nation,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great, thank you all. If you're able to mute your microphones, that would be appreciated. Before we start into the meeting, I did want to just ask all of us to kind of stop and reflect. I wanted to share with you that Mike Odine, the husband of Rotarian Amy Odine, actually passed away suddenly this week. And so I just wanted to share some of the information that I saw from the newspaper. Full name was Charles, but he went by Mike Odine, age 66, died unexpectedly on Monday, January 11th at UIHC following a cerebral hemorrhage. No services are planned, so in lieu of flowers, memorials may be directed to the Boys and Girls Clubs of the corridor, where he formerly served as the board president and a member of the board of trustees. And as well as you can donate to the UI Stead Family Children's Hospital. Mike was a lifelong entrepreneur and a natural leader. He was happiest watching his children play their respective sports, hiking in Arizona and traveling with his family. He always entered a room by telling a joke or relaying an interesting story to make people around him smile. He was deeply loved and respected and will be greatly missed by his family, friends, and colleagues. He's survived by his wife, Amy, their 2 adult children, and their spouses. And online condolences can be shared at lensingfuneral.com. So please just join me in a moment of silence for Mike Odeen, husband of Rotarian Amy Odeen. Thank you. So with that, as we start our meeting, I am going to turn this over to Kelly Drown for a few Zoom tips from Kelly. Kelly,
All right. Thank you, Barb, President Barb. All right, just a friendly reminder to please mute your microphone to take away any of that background noise, as well as a reminder that when you are in a scenario like this, you can certainly use the gallery feature, but when we switch over to the speaker, you will want to choose up in the right-hand corner your speaker option so that you can more clearly see our speaker for the day and others that have announcements. Also reminder that you can go down into participants and use the raise your hand feature. That will be an opportunity when you have questions after the end of the presentation, as well as if you have a guest or a visiting Rotarian. Please use the raise your hand option and we will be sure to call on you. And then I think that might be it, Barb. Back to you.
All right, thanks so much. So before we go to introductions, if you're just joining the meeting, we have kind of, I've put out a challenge to our members that we're all kind of going a little January stir crazy, COVID stir crazy. So please go into the chat and write in your recommendations of things that people could do this weekend. So, we're all looking for something to do. Eric thinks we should go sledding. I know that there's some free movies actually through Film Scene that I heard of. So if you have some great ideas, please feel free to share. What could people do this weekend if they wanted just kind of a great change of pace? Always looking forward to the different ideas. So next we're going to go to introductions. So I'm going to turn it back over to Kelly, and this is where you get to practice those Zoom skills that she talked about. You can go to the participant button and you can raise your hand and she'll call on you and you can introduce yourself to our members. So back to you, Kelly.
All right, I do know that Cindy Kreiner has a guest.
I don't see them yet, so.
Okay. Okay, no problem. Let's see, John Kenyon has a guest.
Yes, hi everyone. My guest is Anna Barker, who we've already heard from today. She's an assistant adjunct professor at the University of Iowa and a member of the City of Literature Board of Directors. And I think we're going to start discussing membership for Anna. So we're excited about that. So welcome, Anna.
Excellent. Well, does anyone else have a guest or a visiting Rotarian? Please feel free just to unmute your microphone and say hello. I don't see any other hands raised at this point, President Barb.
I do see that Greg's has somebody joining him for the meeting. Greg,
Okay.
Greg's, I think you need to unmute so that you can introduce your guest who's with you today.
Were you referring to me?
Yes, I was.
Here's my granddaughter, Ashley.
Hi.
Say hi, Ashley, to everybody. She's shy.
She's shy right now, just because, you called on her. So Ashley, welcome. Nice to see you.
It's like, wave, Ashley.
Everyone's waving to Ashley. Great.
Thank you, Bob.
You bet. All right, so next we are going to do our weekly Rotary Moment of Gratitude and Positivity. And this week we are actually going to go to Dan McGivern for that. Dan, are you there?
Oh, there you go. I am. How are you?
I'm doing good. Good to see you.
Thank you. I have to tell you, I'm not prepared. I thought I just submitted it and didn't know I had to read it. So
Oh,
give me a few minutes and I'll pull it up and I can, if you can, come back to me.
you bet we can do that.
All
So
right.
before we move on to that, we'll kind of come back to Dan in another minute. I want to check in and see if there is anybody who has any announcements for the club. Are there any committees that want to report on anything at this point in time? I haven't had anybody step forward, but I do see that Tara Menettos has her hand raised. Tara?
Hi, Tara Menettos here, co-chair of Rotarian Supporting Women. We're going to have a brief meeting after our club meeting today to finalize some things on the scholarship. So if you have ever been interested in joining, I'm going to put a link to the meeting in the chat box now, and you're welcome to join us. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tara. So again, you know, the Rotarian Supporting Women, they have, last year, they provided scholarships to 2 different women for their college education. And so they're doing really great work, but they could always use some additional help. So make sure if you're interested that you look in the chat and that you capture that link right there. So, okay, I'm going to check in with you, Dan, and see if you might be prepared. Are you?
I am.
Okay, great. I'll turn it over to you.
All right, so I'm glad to be here, and Barbara and I had quite a bit going back and forth. Don't know if anybody else noticed, but her son's name is Justin Thomas, and I just sent him a note saying he looks a lot different on TV. But it got me into talking about golf and some other things and things to be positive about. So I started with in these unprecedented times, and aren't we all sick and tired of hearing that? It seems increasingly more difficult to find things to be positive about. So in a former life, 3 to 4 decades ago, I caddied in the Manor VIP golf outing at Finkbine. And over the 18 years that I carried, I caddied for numerous celebrities and professional golfers. Glenn Campbell, Ernest Borgnine, Goober Lindsay, Mickey Mantle a couple times, several times. Professional golfers, Don January, Jay Haas, Joanne Carner. She really upset her playing partner. She's hitting from the tips and out driving all the guys. A lot of short, fat guys were really mad that day. George Archer and I had Dave Stockton for several times. So anyway, my first real celebrity was a guy named Buck Trent. He was a backup banjo player for Roy Clark. He said something to me then that I didn't understand. But now I fully embrace. And he admitted that golf almost cost him his marriage. You know, he said in Nashville, we've got drugs, we've got alcohol, we got women. Golf was the culprit. I would drive down the street and look at someone's front yard and wonder what kind of lie I could get there and what kind of shot I could hit. It made me laugh at the time, and it brings a smile to my face when I think about it now. What I'm most positive about is that I cannot wait to go play golf again and hug my grandchildren, totally free of all these, of all the protocol. I've been sitting in my dining room since last March. I haven't been to a grocery store or any other building with people inside since then. Besides, I'm older with some heart issues, and I'm fairly high risk for COVID-related death. So my daughter's a PA, and my middle son's a doctor, and my deal with them is if I behave and follow the rules, I'm allowed to play golf once a week in my league. So I stay in my cart. I don't go in the clubhouse. I'm the only one in the league wearing a mask, and I'll just persevere until I can get vaccinated. What this pandemic has taught me is that I still can continue to serve my clients, even though we can't meet in person. Luckily, and by design, I've slowly transferred my professional or my financial advising practice to online over the last 20 years. And I've been able to continue to serve my clients, make presentations to, and acquire new clients via Zoom meetings. So to be honest, I migrated to online meetings to cut down on travel, and expenses. The result is being prepared to continue to work no matter where I am. I'm also positive we will come out of this pandemic, a much stronger community, and I cannot wait to see what it looks like. Now, as a sidebar, the highlight of the day with Buck Trent was when we almost hit Roy Clark when he sliced his tee shot on 15 and it made it to the 14th fairway. There was a lot of apologizing going on at that point, but it was a great day. So that's my positivity minute for our Rotary moment.
Great. Thank you so much, Dan.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
Dan. So Dan and my son, Justin Thomas, had a little, did a little private chat. And, so if you don't follow golf, there is a golfer who's kind of at the top of his game named Justin Thomas. My son does golf, but has only done so for a year or two, but he doesn't mind being compared to him. The funny story was that we found out that the famous golfer Justin Thomas, his dad is named Michael Thomas, and you guessed it, that is my husband's name as well. So he says he's gonna tweet to the other Justin Thomas and tell him that they could do the father-son golf outing at some point in time. However, that Michael Thomas probably golfs a little bit better than my Michael Thomas. It's quite possible. So we will see.
Yeah, he's the teaching pro. He taught his son how to play. So yeah, he's a PGA professional.
Well, my Justin Thomas could kind of use that help. So, maybe if he's around in the summer and we're able to golf, some of you guys could take him out and teach him a few things. So next we'll move on to our program. I'm going to turn it over to Kelly Drown, who will introduce our speaker. Kelly?
Thank you again, President Thomas. But now I'm on the Thomas, President Barb Thomas. I am delighted to introduce Tom Cook, who is no stranger to any of us. But Dr. Cook is currently Professor Emeritus in Physical Therapy and Rehabilitation Science and Public Health at the University of Iowa, where he serves as Director of Global Operations for the Ponseti International Association. He is a member of our Noon Rotary, co-founder of the nonprofit Clubfoot Solutions, and a founding member of the Rotarian Action Group for Clubfoot. Tom is here today to speak with us about Rotary Action Group for Clubfoot, One Child's Perspective. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Cook. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kelly, and thanks for this opportunity. Give me 1 second to make all the technology work here. Let's see. And all right, we're going to share that and do this. Okay, I assume that everybody can see something there.
We can, yep.
Okay, all right. So again, thanks for the introduction, Kelly, and thanks for the. Let's see, I have one more adjustment to make here so I can see what's going on. Okay, so thanks for the introduction and thanks for this opportunity to talk about Clubfoot. I know a number of you may be saying, "Oh no, not Cook about Clubfoot again," but I'll try to give it a little different twist and bring you up to date on a few things. The subtitle for the talk is "One Child's Perspective," and we often look at a problem like Clubfoot from sort of the health system point of view or the organizational point of view that's trying to solve a problem. And it occurred to me a while back that there's a need to maybe look at this, or it may be more interesting to look at this from the point of view of the child involved. And there's a specific child that I have in mind, someone I encountered actually in May of 2013 that I built this story around. And I like to share it with you. It turned into a little book that I'll tell you about later, but I think it's an important perspective on what a disability or a deformity like Clubfoot really means. Let's consider the story of this little guy. His name is Lucky, or his nickname is Lucky. It turned out to be that. He's 8 years old. He lives in a small village, a small rural village, somewhere in Africa. He lives with his mom and dad and 2 brothers and 3 sisters. Lucky's family gets most of their food from their garden. from their chickens, their goats, and their cow. We have one cow. They carry their water from a common well. It's about a 20-minute walk through the forest. They collect sticks and branches and make fires to cook their food. Unfortunately, Lucky was born with crooked feet. He was otherwise normal and healthy. No one in his village had ever seen a baby with crooked feet like that before. Lucky's dad was not very happy. He was ashamed and embarrassed. He thought these crooked feet might be a curse from his ancestors, or that something his wife did wrong during pregnancy, or maybe it was even the polio vaccine that caused his son to be born with crooked feet. He thought that a child who couldn't walk wouldn't, or maybe shouldn't, make it through life. Luckily, Lucky's grandma lived close by, and she took him in as an infant and raised him. But when Lucky got a little older, he had a big problem trying to walk. One foot pointed at the other one, and that one almost pointed behind him, as you see here. His feet were folded over. He was standing on the sides. He tried hard to walk, but it hurt, and he kept falling down. So Lucky kept doing what he did as a baby. He crawled everywhere he needed to go, which really wasn't very far. He just motored around Grandma's house. Since Lucky couldn't walk to school, Grandma was his teacher, and she used some of Lucky's sisters and brothers' books and papers that they brought by every day on their way home from school. And Lucky and Grandma listened to the radio when she could get good batteries to keep it working. Sometimes Lucky wondered what it would feel like to run or kick a ball or climb a tree. Sometimes he got mad at his feet because they wouldn't let him do those things like the other kids. But one day, two people in white coats came walking up the path and visited Grandma's house. They were medical students, and they were in the village to find out, as part of their outreach program, find out how people live in the rural communities. They looked at Lucky and after a while began talking to Grandma about clubfoot. And that was a word that Grandma had never heard before, and certainly Lucky had never heard before. So after talking a while, Grandma agreed to bring Lucky to the students' hospital to see a doctor there. So a couple of days later, Lucky got to ride in a car for the first time in his life. You see him here in a little red shirt hanging out the window. He thought it was a lot of fun. He got to see lots of different people and lots of other places. When he got there, the doctor at the hospital looked at Lucky's feet. He examined them, he moved them around a little bit. After talking to Grandma, the doctor and the nurse applied a plaster cast, first to Lucky's lower leg, then his thigh, and connected the two pieces. And then they did the same thing with his other leg. When he got back to Grandma's house, Lucky's brothers and sisters thought his casts were really interesting. They'd never seen them before. Like kids everywhere around the world, they eventually wrote their names on them with their school pencils and markers. They drew pictures of monkeys, lions, elephants, and birds. And sometimes they just made silly scribbles like kids will do on casts. Grandma and Lucky went back to the hospital the next week. The nurse's helper cut off the cast with what to Lucky seemed to be a big, scary metal tool, but it didn't really hurt him. The doctor looked at Lucky's feet. He moved them around again a little bit, and then they applied two new casts, one on each leg. Grandma and Lucky went back to the hospital every week 4 more times. The same driver came to get them. The same nurse's helper cut off the old cast with the same scary tools. The same doctor moved Lucky's feet around, and they applied new casts the same way. But after they took off the cast for the 5th time, they asked Lucky to slide off the table and stand up. He did. But he couldn't believe that his feet were flat on the floor. They were pointing straight ahead and they weren't any longer folded over. He thought these feet looked like somebody else's feet, not his. When Lucky's brothers and sisters came by after school that day, they were really surprised to see his straight feet. That's when they began dancing around and when they first called him Lucky. Lucky's mom and dad were really happy when they saw him with his straight feet. They kept looking at his feet, especially his dad, who just couldn't believe what he was seeing. In a few weeks, Lucky's legs and feet got strong enough to carry water from the well and to work in the garden and to help around the house with other chores. And Lucky was happy that he was by that time living back home, walking to school, and kicking a ball like the other kids. So that's basically Lucky's story. And this is a good picture of Lucky right here. Little background on Clubfoot. Lucky was one of 200,000 babies who are born with clubfoot deformity every year, many in low resource countries or poor environments like Lucky. Many go through life with their clubfoot deformities uncorrected, as you see with the gentleman here on the right. Lucky's club feet were corrected using the low-cost, low-tech, highly effective method developed by Dr. Ignacio Ponseti here at the University of Iowa, as many of you know. It consists of a series of gentle manipulations to stretch the affected tissues and gradually realign the bones of the foot. I often equate it to orthodontics for your foot. The manipulations are followed by a precisely applied cast that are changed weekly or every 10 days. And each cast holds the foot in a progressively better position. And after about 4 to 6 casts for most patients, the foot looks and functions normally, and normally for the rest of the patient's life. For infants and young children that are still growing and still have growth spurts, they are required to wear a clubfoot brace, which is really a comfortable pair of shoes connected to a separator or stabilizing bar. They wear this brace when they sleep up till they're 4 years old, and that's intended to prevent the deformity. The genetic code for clubfoot is still there, and the tendency when the kids are relaxed and sleeping is for the foot to curl back up again. So what's the connection between Lucky's story and the Rotary Action Group for Clubfoot? How can Rotarians contribute to the happy endings of stories of the tens of thousands of Luckies, or kids like Lucky, around the world? And let me pose a few possibilities. Public awareness. With more than 30,000 clubs and communities around the world, Rotarians are strategically located to increase public awareness about clubfoot on a global scale. It's hard to think of any other organization that has the reach and the infiltration in communities around the world like Rotary, as we know. They can spread messages like clubfoot is not anyone's fault. No one should feel guilty about a child born with clubfoot. And very importantly, the message that clubfoot is treatable. No one has to go through life as a beggar or an outcast because of a fixable deformity like clubfoot. Another activity that Rotarians can contribute to is early referral, and that is facilitate early referral of infants, hopefully, ideally infants, with clubfoot, because when the kids are first born, it's easier to correct the deformity and to keep it corrected. There's a need to educate community health workers, nurses, pediatricians, midwives, obstetricians, local healers, faith-based leaders, village elders, and anyone else who may be an influencer in a community and able to identify cases of clubfoot and get to the appropriate treatment centers. And then, what we find from our experience in many countries is oftentimes it's the logistical issues surrounding treatment that are impediments to engaging in or completing the treatment. So in many low resource communities, parents need to, they need some help in making the weekly trips to the clinic or every 10-day trips to the clinic to have their child's cast changed. In some cases, they may need to stay overnight to attend the clubfoot clinic the next morning. I can tell you of instances in which women will carry their babies 4 or 5 hours one day, sleep in the courtyard outside the clinic so that when the doctor comes in the next morning for the morning clinic, that they can be first in line to get their child treated. They may need help with food for themselves during these kinds of journeys. Someone may have to deal with the siblings that oftentimes have to come along, or they may need someone to supervise the kids back home while they're off in their clinic visits. So just the practical side of actually making repeat 4, 5, or 6 return trips to the clinic to continue the casting process. There's also a need, of course, for supplies and facilities that, again, Rotarians at the local level may be able to help with. Even the very modest supplies for applying the Ponseti method can be an obstacle. For example, plaster may be only $4 a roll, but if you need 2 rolls for each of 2 casts for a child with bilateral clubfoot, that's $16. Now, if your family is living on $1 a day, that's 1/2 of the family's monthly income. And then you have to do that 4 or 5 times. So there's oftentimes a need for something as simple as a few dollars to buy a few rolls of plaster. Similarly, organizations like Clubfoot Solutions, headquartered right here in Coralville, is in the process of supplying high quality braces for only $15 or $20 instead of $400 or $500. But that may still be well beyond the reach of many families if the children need 2 or 3 braces a year because their feet are growing. And in addition, a number of the hospitals and clinics oftentimes need additional room or space for examining and managing their clubfoot services. Of course, none of this happens if you don't have a well-trained healthcare professional who can actually apply the Ponseti method and get the foot corrected. And that high-quality training requires time and money. So fortunately, the Rotary's Global Grants Program is a great resource to fund these kinds of activities. And I'll give you some examples here in just a minute. The Ponseti International Association here at the university is the primary training partner for the Rotary Action Group and works with interested clubs and districts in several countries to write grants to train healthcare practitioners to serve the children in their community, their country, or their region. The long-term goal, of course, is to make the correction of clubfoot using the Ponseti method an integral part of each and every country's healthcare system. In other words, to make correcting clubfoot just as common as dealing with infections or lacerations or broken bones or any other issue that might present itself to the healthcare system, so that the Ponseti method for treating clubfoot is just a routine available service to those who need it. The social and economic benefits of correcting clubfoot are beyond question. Like the general public, government decision makers, they need to understand that clubfoot is an easy and cost-effective way to provide an individual with long-term social impact and to have an individual who's a contributing, productive citizen rather than an individual who requires a lifetime of social services and support. So from a pure economic point of view and a social impact point of view, correcting an infant's clubfoot is really incredibly cost effective and makes sense, but needs to be explained to government officials who are under stress to deal with many, many other health issues, particularly in developing countries. So here's the Rotary Action Group for Clubfoot. These are the kind of things that we mentioned that they can do, but the goal is to, or the purpose is stated here, is to mobilize Rotarians and provide global leadership to support treatment and the care of children. So the Rotarian Action Group doesn't actually train anybody. The Rotarian Action Group mobilizes the resources of the foundation, identifies partners, clubs, let's say in a high income country to match with clubs in a lower income country, to get together and write a competitive grant to provide the resources for training and capacity building, so that long term the programs to treat clubfoot in every country are sustainable for the future. These are some of the people that are involved. The Rotary Action Group was founded here in the Iowa City, Cedar Rapids area in 2015. And here's a list of the current board members. Obviously, you'll see some familiar names on this list. And we're very thankful for all of these Rotarians for the help with this global effort. I mentioned some of the projects. These are the 6 projects that are now ongoing, 6 projects that have been facilitated in one way or another by the RAG and the people associated with the RAG, or the Rotarian Action Group. We have projects like Brazil and Mexico that are kind of in their final stages of a multi-year project supported by the Rotary Foundation. There are a couple others that are more recent and just getting underway. And of course, all have been affected by the pandemic. And like all of us, chomping at the bit to get going again when we can do international travel and group activities. There's no other way to train practitioners to do the Ponseti method than to have over-the-shoulder, hands-on practice and instruction in doing this fairly precise manipulative technique to apply cast. Again, you can imagine applying a cast to a week-old or 2-week-old baby's foot. It's a real challenge to get it just right, and to not be too tight, and to actually get the correction that you're trying to get. How can we help on more of the local level? Well, one easy way to do that is to become a member at the ragforclubfoot.org website. Annual membership is $25. Again, it's not a lot of money, but it helps sort of keep the organization running. There's also opportunity there to donate if you so choose to pitch in a little more and help with these activities. The RAG puts out a newsletter at regular intervals and provides updates on the various projects that are ongoing. Vern will like this one because I think it's important to realize that contributions to the Rotary Foundation are what provides the resources that the different clubs and districts who are trying to address this issue, those are the resources that they go for. Write the global grants, and pitch in the district designated funds and whatever cash that clubs and districts can also provide to actually support the training activities, which are really at the core of what we're trying to do. Once you've got a core of trained practitioners, and parents and other healthcare professionals see the results, once they see that these kids get their feet corrected in 6 or 8 weeks, then it's much easier to do public awareness, to spread by word of mouth the availability of these services. So it's really key to get the medical people on board early, and then grow the program from there. And then the last thing here, besides supporting club and district projects, as I mentioned, is to tell your friends and neighbors about Clubfoot. The more people understand the scope of the problem. In the U.S., of course, Clubfoot is something of an unseen or a hidden deformity. We don't see anybody walking down the street in Iowa City with Clubfoot because they all get treated as infants. But for those of you who have been in other parts of the world and less developed parts of the world, that's not the story. So we need to first educate people about what is clubfoot, what's the scope of the problem, before we can talk to them about the fact that there isn't an easy remedy for this deformity. More information, if you're looking for more information, the Ponseti International Association website here, again at the university, has been around since 2006 to provide information about clubfoot, its treatment, and stories of success and different projects. There's also a recently published book called Clubfoot, The Quest for a Better Life for Millions of Children, published by Ice Cube Press here in North Liberty. I hear it's a pretty good book. I wouldn't trust the author too far. And then if you're interested in a more complete story about Lucky's Feet, that book is available at clubfootsolutions.org. It's also available at Prairie Lights and local bookstores. And if you search Facebook or YouTube for Lucky's Feet, you can view a complete narrated version of the whole story of Lucky's Feet for free. And then Clubfoot Solutions is the organization that produces and distributes low-cost, high-quality braces to the developing world. And here's the same website as Lucky's Feet, clubfootsolutions.org. And if anybody needs more information on this, I'll be more than happy to share that. This is Lucky with his straight feet. He actually had a shirt on that said Lucky on. We didn't pose this for him, but I would say that thank you for this opportunity to talk, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions or comments you might have. Looks like we have plenty of time. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you so much, Tom. So I believe that Todd Becker is here as well. Todd is actually one of our Rotarians who works with Clubfoot Solutions. Todd, do you want to come in and just talk a little bit about what Clubfoot Solutions, what your main mission is?
Sure, appreciate it. Thank you very much. Hey, Tom, tremendous job there. It was awesome seeing Lucky's story brought out that way on our call here too. It was really great. So anyway, yes, we're based here in Coralville, Iowa, and Dr. Cook and Dr. McQuende are the co-founders of Clubfoot Solutions, and they started that project back in 2012. I came on board in 2015 to launch the Iowa Brace into the market worldwide. And the way our organization is set up is we donate braces to children in need all over the world. The way we are able to do that is we also sell the Iowa Brace in the United States and in developing countries. So we have about 14 distributors around the world right now that sell the Iowa Brace. Then we use that profit from the sale of the Iowa Brace to people that can afford them through insurance or whatever, to give braces away to children in need, to like Lucky. So you saw Lucky there. Lucky was the actual recipient of getting some Iowa braces at no charge. And we have clinics and nonprofits all over the world that we work with where we will provide braces to them each year. And it depends kind of how our budgets are for the year from a donation standpoint, from a sales standpoint, and that type of stuff. As it relates to Rotary, we've worked with all the programs that Tom put down there, from Bolivia to Mexico to Colombia. We've worked within all of those programs to ensure that not only samples were sent for the program, but also a supply of braces that were worked out between clubs for Rotarians to give away to the doctors that were treating kids' feet. So it's been a wonderful program. We're growing each year. Last year was a tough year with the pandemic. Our growth wasn't where we wanted it to be. But I'm hoping that this year we can kind of get through this and get back to a growth stability program again where we were in 2019. We had a tremendous year in 2019 and want to kind of grow past 2019.
Great, thanks so much. It looks like Tom is sharing with us some pictures of those Clubfoot cuties. I follow both the Rag for Clubfoot and Clubfoot Solutions on Facebook, and I know that they'll frequently show some great pictures of these young kids with the braces, and it's kind of definitely interesting to see that. So
Yeah, so let me, if you, Barb, if you want, I can talk one thing about that. So we started this program, I believe it's been about a year and a half now, where our social media platforms become pretty large, as you can imagine. So we asked people to send us just their picture of their child and their brace from all over the world. So every week we have a new one from all over the world that we'll get a picture on social media, and we present that out there to them. But it's been a pretty neat thing because we now have over 70,000 eyewear braces distributed throughout the world. So to see these kids come back now is pretty neat. And the one thing that I didn't really realize until I had a phone call from a parent the other day, their child is getting ready to graduate out of the eyewear brace. And that's, kind of where we're at right now in that 4 to 5 year period. We're starting to see children that got into the eyewear brace 4 or 5 years ago when we started that are now graduating now with straight feet and out of the braces. So that's been a pretty cool thing.
that is awesome. That's great. Well, we have a question from Pete Wallace. Pete, do you want to unmute and ask your question? Anybody else who's interested in a question, please go to the participant button and raise your hand.
Yeah, Tom, great presentation as always.
Thank you, Pete.
Explain a little about the training of the practitioners that do this. I know some you invite here to Iowa City to work with Jose and others, but how are they chosen, and how do you do the ones in Colombia and Mexico, and how are they trained on site?
Yeah, good question, Pete. Thank you. Well, it's a two-way street. On a typical non-COVID year, we would have about somewhere in the ballpark of 25 to 30 physicians from other parts of the world would come here, usually 2 at a time, because the training is, as I mentioned, is really hands-on, over the shoulder. Mess with the plaster, get it right, feel the kid's feet, and so on. So it's typically a 2-week training. So they would come for 2 weeks and work with Jose. The clinics are Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So there may be as 15 or 20 or 25 patients a day on each of those days. So they get plenty of experience. Sometimes they come 1 week and have to go back and then come another week if they're from the US. But so there's that many that come here and learn, again, firsthand. And then in terms of other countries, when we have a project, I'll give an example, project in Mexico. In Mexico, we have about 4 or 5 people that we call trainers. So it's really a train the trainer program. So these are 4 people that have been here or that have worked intensely with Dr. Marquende or 1 or 2 other of our sort of international experts. They're not only good at what they do, but they're good trainers. I mean, those are 2 distinct skills. One thing is to be a good clinician. Another thing is to be able to teach that, especially when you're letting people do hands-on things and make a few mistakes and so on. So in Mexico, we went down and did a 4-day program in conjunction with those trainers to make sure the trainers were up to speed and doing things right. And then they went and did another 4 or 5 locations in Mexico. And then each of the people they trained went to Shriners Hospital in Mexico City for 2 weeks to do their internship, sort of. And Shriners Hospital in Mexico City sees about 200 patients with clubfoot a week. Okay, so there's plenty of learning opportunity there. So it's, we do as much train the trainer as possible, because obviously Dr. Marquende can't be everywhere in every country with its needs. So we're growing this network of centers of excellence like Shriners Hospital in Mexico City, and trainers who have bought into this to where they'll invest their time to go train other people. And it is an investment in many countries where physicians who have a very difficult time taking a week away to train somebody else or to attend a meeting. That's a lost week of income, because they're not necessarily salaried, they're fee for service. So hope we got that one. Ryan, or whoever's next in line.
Yep, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks again, Tom. Great as always. I learn something new every year you do this. I'm just curious, it seems like the bottleneck is kind of in that training with the physicians and and that one-to-one approach. Is there any way to use like 3D printing technology to kind of do this more remotely? I think of how my orthodontist rifles my kids through their braces care, for their teeth, and all those are like laser cut, these Invisalign pieces of plastic that cost next to nothing. Is there a way to maybe utilize some of that technology in this process, or is it too hands-on to, kind of take the physician out of it?
It's pretty hands-on. The challenge is that each of these feet are different. I mean, you got this bony little skinny feet, you've got the fat chubby feet. Even in a kid who has 2 club feet, one can be much stiffer than the other. So it's really hard, and people have tried. They've come up with sensors and all sorts of gloves with force sensors in them, and try to predict. And I would say none of that has been very successful. And it's just really too skill oriented. I mean, I know people do robotic surgery, but this is like outside surgery. This is like manipulating, feeling through the skin, and most of the bones in a week or 10-day-old kid are not really formed. They're mostly cartilage. They're soft and mushy. So there's a real skill involved, and and some practitioners never get it. I mean, they may be qualified surgeons. They can use instruments and do great things, but they just can't grasp the feel it takes for this teeny little foot and what to do with it. So it's we haven't come up with any way to substitute for the actual hands-on training. And then you may even have more sophisticated, even if you had more sophisticated technology, in many of the really poor developing countries, they may not even have electricity in some of these clinics in rural areas. And that's one of the beauties of the Ponseti method, is it just takes plaster and water, rolls of plaster and water is it. You don't need an anesthesiologist. You don't need an x-ray. You don't need anything, no hypodermic needles, nothing. You just need the skill of the practitioner and some plaster, which is about as cheap as you get when it comes to a medical supply.
Quite true.
Gary, you got something? We still got time? Yeah.
Yep. Gary Pesha, you want to ask your question? He was there, and then he kind of visually disappeared for a minute.
Kind of waved us off, huh?
Right. I'll just make a quick reminder. Please make sure, everybody, that you go into the chat and sign in. That's how we kind of keep our attendance. And then we'll see. So, Tom, you had mentioned that, given COVID, so there's just no opportunity for any type of that training to happen right now.
Yeah, we're pretty much in a holding pattern. I mean, international travel, and even travel within the U.S., even doctors from different parts of the U.S. Coming here. The hospital's been pretty locked down, as we all know, and so we're on hold, building up a backlog. Thankfully, we've been able to deal with the patients. So the children that need clubfoot treatment, those clinics have continued to be active, and the patients keep coming. Here at least, and to the other medical centers within the U.S. But training new people is pretty much on hold, at least the hands-on part of the training.
Right. And you mentioned that Mexico City has a hospital that you consider kind of a center of excellence. Are there others around the world as well?
Oh, yes. We have a Indus hospital in Karachi, Pakistan, we've been working with for 15 years. And again, they had a number of about 4 of their key people came here, spent their 2 weeks, really got on board. Dr. Marquende has been there 3 or 4 times since to help train other people and make sure they're training right. So Karachi, Pakistan, Lagos, Nigeria, a couple of good places. And then in Brazil, we have a couple of places in Brazil. So we tried to develop at least these regional centers of excellence to cuts down on the training. People speak the right language. They're culturally appropriate. I mean, it's much more efficient than having somebody fly in and, in 2 or 3 days, do the classic medical mission visit and say, here's what you do it right, we'll see you. It takes a little more than that with the Ponseti method.
Gotcha. Well, I do think Gary Patience had trouble with his connection because I think he's kind of popped in and popped out, and right now he's still kind of out. But before, hopefully he could pop back in. Oh, Steve West has his hand raised. Steve?
Uh-oh. Go ahead, Steve.
Tom, it's always a pleasure to hear you and hear the update, and you're always an inspiration, I think, to all of us Rotarians and whoever you come in contact with. You have been a flag bearer of this from the get-go, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Early
On, obviously, the difference between the Ponseti method and that of surgery was a critical problem or a concern. Do you have any stats or any insight on, through your efforts and the Ponseti method and all the things that have been done and now through Rotary, how have we passed that tipping point of doing this method, which is the most beneficial to children, versus the surgical method?
Well, I can say there's two sides to that. One is in developing countries, in many developing countries, surgery was never an option because they don't have the surgical resources. But in developed countries, of course, US, Europe, Japan, Australia, surgery was a common approach. And there's no question that in an hour and a half, a skilled surgeon can take a deformed clubfoot and make it look like a foot. The data clearly shows that down the line, it's a disaster, because to correct the clubfoot surgically, they need to dissect a lot of ligaments, lengthen tendons, rearrange bones, put in metal pins, and again, it makes it look like a foot. Once you're a teenager or an adult, you're full of arthritis, pain, stiffness, and that's what motivated Dr. Ponseti to develop this technique in the first place. In the 1940s, he was commissioned to look at post-surgical patients and immediately said there's got to be a better way, and that's what he developed. Now, back to your question today, you would think, 60 years later, 70 years later, the message has been out there, the data has been out there, but unfortunately, there's still a number of locations in the US where they do surgery on infants. Now, the number of surgeries has decreased by 90%. Okay, so if you look from the year 2000 to now, the number of surgeries in children under the age of 1 for clubfoot has decreased by 90 or 92%. There's still 8% out there that are doing these things. Oftentimes what will happen is one of the doctors will attempt to do clubfoot because the parents demand it. The parents go on the internet, and there's no question clubfoot, that Ponseti method is the standard. So they go into the doctor with their little newborn kid and say, he's got clubfoot, we want you to do the Ponseti method. And do you know how to do it? And of course, some doctors will know how to do everything, right? Sorry for any of the doctors on board here, but there are some small number who will say, oh yeah, I do the Ponseti. So they put on some cast and they do something without any training of any kind. 3-4 months later, the foot isn't corrected. It's still as bad as it was or worse because they didn't put the cast on right. So then they say, well, this is an unusual case, we need to do surgery. So unfortunately, the surgery among slightly older kids has gone up because of the cases where the Ponseti method wasn't done right in the first place. So we're still fighting the battle and still doing our best to inform the parties involved and the decision makers involved that if a doctor doesn't really know how to do the Ponseti method right, pass it on to somebody who does. That's the problem we deal with. Sorry for the long-winded answer.
No, it's a great, a 90% decrease in that type of correction is a great stamp of congratulations and approval on what you've done on this over the last 10 years.
Well, I haven't done it. It's mainly the parents who have done it. It's the parents who have gone on the internet and told other parents, don't let them put a knife on your kid's feet. Go ahead and take care of it. Okay.
Let's
Barb?
go to Gary Pasha for that question. Gary?
Gary.
I just want to first echo what Steve said. You epitomize Rotary's service above self ethic for what you've done in this project. God bless you.
I do have a quick question. At one point, I know because I witnessed it, we did some work at a hospital in Guatemala, in the area where we work with Iowa Most. And I'm curious whether did it fail and why did it? And also, you should be aware that there's been changes there in our relationship with that country and that community that might warrant a revisit. I'm just curious of your response.
Yeah, I have to say I'm not up to speed on Guatemala. So my information is not current. One of the Central American countries there, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, those Central American countries are difficult because their health systems are not very well developed, and they're sort of hodgepodge. In some the urban areas, things are pretty well organized. The rural communities, there's nothing there. So I really don't know the latest. And if you have some, if there's some opportunity to revisit that, there's certainly a couple well-trained doctors there, I know. One of the problems in developing countries, again, is the doctors get paid on fee for service. And if they can make, better income for their families doing other things, because oftentimes clubfoot doesn't pay. Clubfoot is just plaster and some manipulations, and most health systems and insurance companies don't really reward something as simple as the Ponseti method. But I'm happy to talk to you offline if you got some.
Yeah, let me do a little research, and
okay.
maybe we could ever get this awful pandemic behind us. We can get together and talk more. But I'll do some more research on it in the community where we were. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Great. Well, Tom, thank you very much. Always a great program when you come and speak about Clubfoot and all of those efforts. Totally applaud everything that you're helping kind of do. You do a great job presenting about it. And I know that you present about it at like kind of all hours of the day to organizations all across the globe in the middle of the night if you have to. So, you're doing a great effort for a great cause. So
I'm just the messenger. The people really doing the work are not me.
a messenger is a good thing.
It's the people in the trenches that are doing the work.
Well, excellent. Well, thanks. And in honor of your presentation today and you taking the time to do this, our club will actually donate to Rotary International's Polio Plus program in your name. And as you know, that donation is actually matched 2-to-1 by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And that donation alone will provide 70 vaccinations for polio. So thanks so much for taking the time to do it. I also do want to give a shout out to another Rotarian, Byron Borg, because that book that Tom highlighted to you about Lucky, that Byron actually, he and his wife were able, they made a donation, if I'm getting this correct, and they were able to get that book into the libraries of all of the elementary schools in the Iowa City Community School District. So thanks so much to Byron. And it is just a reminder that if you have friends or other Rotarians, that is something that those other Rotary clubs could do, is actually help provide that book into the libraries of the elementary schools in their communities as well. So with that, I think that is the end of our meeting. Thanks to you all for joining us, and I welcome you to unmute your microphones and join in the four-way test. Of the things that we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendship? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Great. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Thanks so much, Tom. Great job.